Hello again, my name is Chance McCord, and today we will be talking about the assigned article of how slavery really ended, and also the discussion of the Civil War and how slavery played a part in it. Now, the Civil War technically started in April of 1861 when the Confederate Army fired on Fort Sumter. But in reality, one could claim that the Civil War was bound to happen since the Declaration of Independence, when Thomas Jefferson proclaimed that all men are created equal. Because of that statement, ever since then, all the way up until 1861, people had been arguing back and forth, north and south, of what exactly that meant and if that applied to slaves. Now, the Southern claim was that slaves were property and never were people, while the Northern claim is that that also applies to slaves, or the abolitionist claim. I can't say all of the North, but the abolitionist claim is that that applies to slaves too, and that they should not be slaves and they are not property, they are people. Therefore, they should be created equal. Now, because of that, ideologically speaking, slavery was at the core of the Civil War, but at the same time, that wasn't exactly the case. Now, there were many other things that also led up to the Civil War, including somewhat of an overreach by the federal government at the time than what the states were used to. There were many new powers coming into play by the federal government that had not really been tested. Therefore, the states were not used to the overreach of the federal government. Therefore, especially the South, who felt very independent of that and stressed more states' rights than they did, following the government and whatever they said. Now, also another part of this was the many different examples of states joining the Union and declaring if they were a slave state or a free state. Now, the reason this was such a big deal is because it was all political, really. If a state came in and declared that they were a free state, and there was only one state that came in, that would mean that Congress would get more representation for the North or for the free states, while the southern states would not have as much representation, therefore not having really a say in what the nation was talking about, because it was very politically divided at the time, coming up to the Civil War. Therefore, whenever new states joined the Union, it was a big deal because everybody was like, whoa, wait, what are they going to be? Are they going to be a slave state or a free state? Because that would mean that who gets more representation on everything like that, basically, that went along with this. And considering the United States was growing rapidly when it comes to new states being entered into the Union, it was bound for disaster. Now, the war did not entirely revolve around the topic of slavery, in the beginning at least. It seemed as if, and with the Southern claim, that it was more over the overreach of the federal government, the presidency, and the less power that the states were being given. That was the Southern claim, at least. The North somewhat claimed it was over slavery, but they were still talking about how the South was an uprising because they didn't like the North's policies. So it really started out like that at first, but over time it became clear that this was truly about slavery and about how it was over their states' rights to own slaves was the biggest thing. That was the biggest part of their states' rights that were being encroached upon. Especially this came to light especially when General Butler allowed so many slaves to come into Fort Monroe in Virginia. So that was what really drove the war in the end. Especially after the Emancipation Proclamation too. At the end of 1862, when Abraham Lincoln announced the Emancipation Proclamation, his Secretary of State even admitted that everyone knew this was coming before even they said it. That it was just kind of a matter of time before this was going to happen in the war. That everyone knew it was coming before they did. Now, slavery in the South affected the war very predictably, really. A lot of slaves, even in the story of even in the article of how slavery really ended, the slaves were being used to fortify encampments They were used to make artillery. They were used to work in factories. They were used for many different things to grow the food for the armies. There was a lot of different things that the slaves were really used for the slave effort, or for the war effort. Apologies. Um, but that's basically what I have to say about the events of the Civil War and how slavery affected it. And thank you for your time.